Hey everyone, my name is Espen and I've just put together a course on the OM system for wildlife photography. Now this is a short section from that course where I go over how I get my correct exposure using the highlight alerts. If you're interested in learning more about the course, stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you more about it. Hope you enjoy. I love how easy it is to get a correct exposure using my Olympus camera. And the way I used to expose, or the way you've all probably heard of exposing to the right, you look at the histogram, and in my old DSLR, I would have to take an image and then look at the histogram and check to see how far along to the right my histogram was, and then if it wasn't right, change my settings, take another image. Now though, I can get that information in real time, and you can also set up your shadow and highlight alerts, which I just highly encourage you to do, as it makes it so easy to get your exposure correct and not blow out your highlights, which is usually the main concern we have when we're taking photos these days. I just look to see if I overexpose my highlights, and I never change the metering mode. My metering mode is always just in the same, the way it was in the beginning, and I use the ESP, which I think is like an evaluative metering mode. But as I'll show you, it actually doesn't matter because I just look at the highlights and make sure I don't overexpose them, or at least I don't overexpose them unless I want to do it intentionally. Okay, so if you want to set this up the way I have, I'll show you how to use it afterwards. But first we'll go into the cog, we'll go down to I, and we'll go to info settings. So in info settings, I like to use custom 1 and custom 2. I like to just make them up myself. There's also a default one, which is just a clear screen, which is kind of handy as well when you just need that kind of real estate. You need to see everything in the image. You're really focusing on framing your shot and getting composition right. But for custom mode 1, I like to have all the boxes ticked. So the one of them is a histogram. So you actually get a histogram up as you're viewing the image. Next one is a highlight and shadow. So that's the highlight and shadow alerts, which will display, mine usually displays red if I'm blowing out my highlights, and it displays blue if I'm going too dark and I've lost detail in shadows. And then a level gauge, I like to have that on as well, because it's surprisingly easy to not hold your camera level, especially when you're in awkward situations, lying down maybe, and all these things. It's really handy to have that. So that's my custom 1. I like to just be able to see everything. Now from custom 2, I like to take off the histogram, because the histogram does take up quite a lot of real estate in your view, and you don't always need it. Very often I just use the highlight alert to get my exposure. It's nice to have the histogram every now and then just to kind of double check, but it does take up a lot of space. So very often I use custom mode 2 when I'm actually taking my images, and I just leave on the highlight alerts, and I have the level gauge on as well. And then, as I mentioned, the default is just everything clear. So what you can do then, when you're looking through the viewfinder or even in the back of the LCD screen, you can cycle through these using the info button, and then I'll have 3 different displays available to me. So if you go down to the halfway level, I set that to on. That means that if I half press the shutter button, I will get that level gauge up to see that my camera is actually level. And I do this because quite often I will cycle through the info button, and I'll use the view where I have nothing showing in the screen. I'm just worried about my composition. But obviously then it's very important that you actually get it level as well, because if not, you will have to crop the image afterwards and you'll lose some valuable pixels. So half press the shutter button, then I can make sure that I'm level, get my shot. After you've done this, you can test out and you can try and get an exposure and maybe try and overexpose. Make sure that you use the info button. If you're using the default view, which has none of the histogram or any of the results you put in, the highlight and shadow alerts, then the highlight and shadow alerts is not going to be there. It's not going to let you know that you're overexposed or underexposed. So you need to be in one of those 2 custom functions that we set up, which has the highlight and shadow alerts on. So if you didn't dial in, and you can then see that all of a sudden you're showing red. Let me show you here. This is how it will look. When it's overexposed, it'll go red. My name is Espen and I'm a wildlife photographer, and I've just put together a course on the OM system for wildlife photography. Everything I've learned about the system, I've put into this course. I will take you guys through how I've set up my cameras to take photos on the Olympus system. First, we dive into initial setups for the camera, and basically the kind of things you usually set up and you forget about them. Then we got a section on the button and dials and levers setup. Everything about how I've set up my camera and why I've set it up the way I have, including all my different custom modes, my menu, and you'll also get a PDF of kind of the outlay of each of my cameras, the EM1X and the EM1 Mark II. Then there's a big section on everything to do with focus. We'll dive into AF limiter, back button focus, custom focus points, manual focus, peaking, all of that. Then we got a special features sections, which include some of those incredible features that a lot of them are unique to the Olympus OM system. We dive deep into Pro Capture with over 20 minutes of footage from how I set it up to real-world examples, and I'll show you guys the settings for each of the images and the story behind them. The special features also cover things like high-res mode, OI share app. I've also included other special features that mostly aren't used for wildlife photography, but I think they're such cool features such as live ND, live composite, live time, focus stacking. Then there's a dedicated section on video. Everything I've learned of using this system for video, for my vlogs, which also includes settings for time-lapse mode. I've also included an in the field section where we dive into my workflow in the field, tricky focusing situations that you might encounter and my kind of fixes for them, as well as birds in flight settings and tips. Through the course, we'll go through the menu and how to set up these different parameters, and I'll also explain why I use certain things so that you can kind of figure out if you want to use these features or not. You know, they might not all be for you. You really want to make it your own. Take what you need from this course and leave the rest. Mostly I'll be showing the setup on my EM1X. Now the great thing about the OM system is that the menu is pretty much the same on all the camera models except for the new OM1. But you can apply a lot of the ideas and settings to the OM1, but the OM1 has an updated menu, so it's a little bit differently laid out. All included in this course, which is over 3 hours and 40 minutes long. So loads to dive into. If you're interested in this course, follow the link Teachable to get a hold of it.